Very, very good evening to both of you, and thank you so much for agreeing to be our guest today. On behalf of Citizens for Justice and Peace and our entire team and our entire community, vast community of human rights defenders all over the country, we are meeting today to particularly talk in defense of Fr Stan Swamy. And unequivocally, CJP would like to state that he's not only just one of our human rights defenders, but from August 31st, 2018, when his place of residence was raided the first time and all his laptop, etc., were taken away, we've said openly that here is a priest who made the people his religion. And thank you so much, Father Cedric Prakash and Father Frazer Mascarenhas, for joining us in this conversation. You both also are very important to the wider human rights community, and we welcome you for that reason. Father Cedric Prakash calls himself a human rights activist and worker, and has been himself, apart from being active in so many movements on the ground, particularly in his work state of Gujarat. He is recipient of the President of India's Kabir Puraskar in 1995 and the National Commission of Minorities Award in 2006. Father Frazer Mascarenhas, known to all of us and very beloved to Mumbai particularly, former principal of St. Xavier's College and academic administrator, and presently at St. Peter's Church, Bandra. Father Stan Swamy, 83-year-old, today is the 4th day since he was very summarily taken away by the National Investigating Agency, and he's in judicial custody at Taloja. We'd like to talk about him, his mission, his work with the people of Jharkhand, empowering Adivasis. A phrase which I personally love when describing Father Stan Swamy, whom we were closely associated with, is that when his friends are from Jharkhand, a common friend, Xavier, describes him, he leapt across the walls of church institutions to be with the people. Father Cedric Prakash, Father Stan Swamy, what does he mean? What does his arrest mean?
Yeah, I think I vibe with what you say, Teesta, what you have written about Father Stan Swamy, what Xavier has said about him, because Father Stan Swamy truly, like Jesus, made religion his people. He transcended the narrow confines of our church compounds, of the compounds of our religious congregation, and he made the cries and joys, the anxieties and the suffering of the people, very especially the Adivasis of Jharkhand, his religion. He became their voice. He accompanied them. He walked the talk with them. And in that sense, he became an icon not merely for them, but in fact, for all the people of India. For me, he is definitely a living saint for all of us today.
What does his arrest mean, Father?
Basically, it means cutting across. We become so, in a way, exclusive. Stan Swamy showed us that Christianity, in fact, all world religions speak about inclusivity. Nobody puts aside the other. And if you're talking about the Adivasis, he spoke about an idiom which was Jal, Jungle, and Jameen. He said they have their identity. And he very clearly said that the identity of these people needs to be restored. They were the powerful, the Western interests who are trying to destroy, take away the resources which naturally belong to them for centuries, even before the other people came into India, like say the Aryans. It was the Adivasis who were living here. And it was this, whether it is the Patalgadi issue or whether it is through PESA, whether it is the Forest Rights Act. So basically, for us in India, for all of us, across the narrow confines of any religion, any group, any ethnicity, any exclusivity, Father Stan Swamy is and will always continue to be a living icon.
Father Frazer Mascarenhas, your words on this 83-year-old priest who was summarily taken away. What does his arrest mean, and what kind of message does it send to people like you and Father Cedric, who've always believed in standing for social justice?
Yes, I think I know Father Stan personally, but from very long ago, when he was the director of the Indian Social Institute in Bangalore. In fact, he taught me a course there when I was a young trainee, a Jesuit trainee, a course in social analysis. So he is really a very thorough academic. He has studied conditions of people, he has studied the Indian constitution and the provisions in it for people who are disadvantaged. And I think he showed a great deal of courage in, after finishing his academic position as director, he decided to go to the grassroots and perhaps do what he had taught others to do. So he went 3 decades ago to Jharkhand, and he has been there working at the grassroots with the group that is known in India as the most vulnerable group of Indian society. The tribals really are the ones who are the worst off, because perhaps, you know, they have been on the fringes of society. They're living in areas which are not inhabited by other types of people. They're living in areas which are very rich naturally and so coveted by industrialists, etc. And their condition is really abysmal. So Father Stan saw that. But I think what Stan adds to this is the point that the Indian constitution has all the safeguards that are required for people like the tribals. And Father Cedric talked about PESA, the extension of the Panchayat Act to tribal areas. That is precisely what was done to safeguard the lives and the culture of the tribals. And it's not being implemented. Just a few days before his address, Father Stan in an interview spoke of that. And he has been precisely defending, using the Indian constitution and the constitution mandated court process to do something for safeguarding the rights of the tribals on their culture and on land, so important to their culture. Now, his arrest is really a blow at all those who are working for social justice. Definitely all the work of the Jesuits across India and other parts of the world, but in India, because he was one of our symbols. And we were all trying to do something similar, but he showed that remarkable courage and a very clear vision of what needs to be done, which I think not all of us have. So to hit at him means to hit at the whole Jesuit work in India, which has been, I think, considerable, not because the Jesuits are saying that, but because government and others have acknowledged that. So it's really a hit at all the Jesuits and all those who are fighting for human rights in our country. That's the tragedy. And I think what it has done is it has spread or it has continued to spread a fear among people that anybody, even an 83-year-old man, sickly, he can hardly walk and not hold his cup, I'm told. Even a person like that can be put behind bars in the most roughshod manner without a warrant, etc. This does not bode well for a democracy. Definitely, this shows a lack of understanding of what democracy is all about. So it's really something that should worry not just the Jesuits who are worried, but the whole of Indian society. We shouldn't want our society to move in this direction. We need to put a stop there.
That's very well put, Father Cedric, Father Frazer. And I think we must speak a little bit about the Society of Jesus and the Jesuits and the remarkable work in the area of social justice in a moment. Before that, I'd like to come back. So 16 people totally now incarcerated in the Bhima Koregaon case. Almost all of them working, or most of them working, if not all of them working in the area of Adivasi, indigenous people, Dalit rights. Most of them not directly connected with the Bhima Koregaon incident at all that took place. And yet they've been cherry-picked and picked up for their decades-long work across the board. And in these 16 cases now, we also have a radical poet, Vara Vara Rao, who's just a little bit younger than Father Stan. You have people in their 80s, 2 people in their 80s. People's health is at stake. There's the COVID-19 pandemic and the worry about the health there. And in the Delhi riots, Delhi violence cases, you have 22 young people, very young people, young leaders picked up. A common thing being the UAPA, which is a very, very draconian law. So even the courts right up to the Supreme Court are not inclined to give you freedom, not inclined to give you bail. It doesn't bode well at all for Indian democracy. Do you think, Father Cedric, it'll stop people from speaking up?
See, they're using this kind of fear stick. You try opening your mouth, you try being visible and vocal, and we will show you what we can do. The likes of Sudha Bharadwaj, Rao, you have spoken about him. There is Anand Teltumde, Arun Ferreira. We came from the same college, St. Xavier's College. Yeah. Vernon Gonsalves, from the same school. Antonio de Sousa School in Bombay. Sudhir Dalwali, Shoma Sen, Surindra Gadling, Mahesh Rao, Rona Bilson, Gautam Navlaka. And what about the people from that Kalamanch? And the others who have been incarcerated, the likes of Umar Khalid and so on, because they have spoken out, you know, at the times of the Delhi riot, but mainly because of the anti-CAA stand, and several others. So basically, they have reached a system, they are addressing or seeing a system which is vindictive, which tolerates no dissent, which is destroying, shredding the whole democratic fabric of our country into pieces. We know, Teesta, how you, Javed, and the others have suffered right from the time you took up what has been happening in Gujarat and what you have gone through and what you're still going through. So anybody who stands up for human rights in India, anybody who's a dissenting voice, anybody who's visible and vocal, they directly or indirectly say that we will brook no nonsense. But the point is not nonsense. We are speaking about truth and justice. We are speaking about the pluralistic fabric of our country. We are speaking about the rights as Stan has been doing and all the others who have been incarcerated in this Bhima Koregaon case, the anti-CAA protesters and others, about what is legally ours, which belongs to every citizen of India. And I think we should not be afraid. This is the time, it is snowballing. A lot of people have come out. And fortunately, I see even the Catholic Church and even the Jesuits coming out now that that Stan is in jail. But I think we should have opened our mouths long ago, been visible and vocal. But at this moment that we are doing it, I think it is important, it is significant. But what all of us need to do in order to overcome those who are afraid, and that definitely there are some who are afraid and they're effectively using this fear kind of stick, we need to network, we need to collaborate, we need to say who all can, you know, visibly and vocally and support. And there are a myriad ways. I know there are several people who are here on listening to us live on Facebook. There are myriad ways by which we can collaborate and cooperate with one another in order to preserve the rights and freedom guaranteed in our constitution, the democratic fabric of our country, and the pluralistic society which we have treasured all these years. Let's begin now.
That's a very, very powerful message. I want to also speak a little bit about, you know, Father Stan's work again, because I think it's so relevant today. I remember that through Bagaicha and through other organizations and many, many forums that he was part of in Jharkhand, you know, he spoke up for over 3,000 under trials who were kind of in jail, languishing in Jharkhand jail for years. Now, the state is formed in year 2000 for the Adivasis, in the name of the Adivasis, but you don't have a chief minister who's Adivasi till you have him, Soren just now. For long, long periods, you don't have Adivasi people in control, in the administration. And he actually proved through a meticulous study and the book that he wrote that those 3,000 people had nothing to do with Naxalites or Maoists. They were actually people who were wrongly incarcerated and wrongly confined. It formed the basis of a petition. That petition is being argued in the Jharkhand High Court. You have the chief minister speaking up against Stan Swamy's arrest, saying that, here is a man who worked for the Adivasis in this state. Why is he being targeted by the central agencies like this? And I think it's important to understand that at the grassroots level, there's actually a battle on between two kinds of visions of development. That there's one development like we were sold in the state of Gujarat in the beginning, which is a kind of development which is jobless growth, which means putting in a lot of money into the hands of crony capitalists and some industrialists, and another kind of development, which is empowering the people, which is PESA, which is Schedule 5 of the Constitution, which is which is operationalizing of the Samata judgment, which came in the late 1990s, but we told us that this gives our right to self-governance to our Adivasis. They should be deciding what projects come or do not come on the land that they have nurtured for generations. But we are not willing as Indians to give that right. Indian government is not willing to give that right. And I think therefore the real issue is also the preamble to our constitution, where the sovereignty lies in the people of this country. And whereas the rulers somehow don't want that sovereignty over land, resources, like you said, Jal, Jangal, Zameen, to actually go to the people. So I think it's going to be a long haul. But as far as Father Stan is concerned, what kind of solidarity do you think we can build? Can we have a letter writing campaign? Can we have a postcard campaign for him like there was done for Sudha Bhardwaj and others? Because it's very lonely, this kind of incarceration. He's also not well. The spirits need to be kept up, and everybody else's spirits also need to be kept up. Father Frazer, do you have any ideas?
Well, I think, the media, we know, has been rather controlled for the last several years. And the real story about what's happening in our country is not coming out. So our first point is really to make people aware of what is happening. As far as Father Stan and all the others who have been incarcerated under this law, in this case, what have they been doing? It's a great irony. Look at the types of people who have been arrested instead of the ones who actually perpetrated that violence at Bhima, Koregaon. These are lawyers. They are using the legal system, the constitutional system.
Yeah.
These are professors. These are rights activists, writers, poets. These are people who are talking about the grassroots empowerment.
Yeah.
And they are trying to help to get a better type of development than the top-down approach, which obviously is only siding with a small section of Indian society. Now, to have these people put under this law of violence, there's nothing violent about them. They are too absorbed in very difficult human rights cases to be talking about violence. Isn't it something like wolf? The irony of it, people who have actually been dedicating themselves to the constitution, they're put under this draconian law of violence. In other words, our whole response to the violence in society, which might be there, because we do know that there are Naxalite groups, but our response to that has been made a joke of. It's not something that we are dealing with seriously at all, because now you hear somebody being arrested under this law, and immediately your mind goes to say, what type of human rights work was he doing?
Yeah.
It doesn't go to say, what is the violence he was involved in. They are taking it for granted that all these people being charged with sedition and under UAPA and NSA, etc., are really, productively contributing to the grassroots of India. And so this is really a very sad situation that such a law has been used against people like this. And I think we should treat it also legally, because it needs to be challenged, especially in the way it is being applied. I think it also goes against international law. So here too, we need to bring this to the attention of people. People are unaware that this is happening. So I would say dissemination of what is really happening is very important. How we do that? Yes, we have to build up grassroots movements for that. Reaching out to people, the common people, to make them aware of this.
That is very, very important, the point you raised, that it is indeed a tragic day for the world's largest democracy, when its finest minds grassroots workers, human rights workers, lawyers, academics are confined under an anti-terror law, and are dubbed terrorists. It is shocking and appalling. Father Cedric, please tell us a little bit and let the world know a little bit about the kind of social justice work that the Society of Jesus and the Jesuit community is engaged in different parts of the country. Because I think we need to also humanize the entire Catholic priesthood and sisterhood, because there's a steady dose of poisonous misinformation that is also being fed through all kinds of WhatsApp groups and social media. Father Cedric.
Teesta, I entered the Society of Jesus in the early 1970s when we had a general congregation called GC32, which gave us what we call the faith justice mandate. I was then in the novitiate, the first years of my life as a religious, and Frazer was, I think, just a little after that. So both of us, Frazer and myself, have been born in the letter and the spirit of GC32, in which we refer to it as the faith justice mandate. That means every single Jesuit in the world is mandated not merely to say Lord, Lord, but to have a witness of one's faith in very, very concrete action, say on the rights of the poor, the legitimate rights of the poor, they exclude the marginalized. At that time, the Society of Jesus was headed by one of the greatest Jesuits we have had, at least for me, Pedro Arupe, a Basque Jesuit who has lived the horrors of Hiroshima. He was the novice master then when the bomb fell on the 6th of August 1945. He made the whole novitiate, of which was a superior, into a battlefield hospital. They picked up people, they visited people, and then he went all across the world to speak about the horrors of a nuclear holocaust. He was not liked by many people in the world. Okay? He later on became the general of the Society of Jesus. And when I joined the society, when Frazer joined the Society of Jesus, he was at the helm. Okay? And he has inspired, and I think many of us in India look on him as a hero, as a saint, and now he's on the fast track even towards beatification, what we say in the Catholic Church, and canonization. But over the years, Jesuits all over, we have had Jesuits even being killed here. We have had a Jesuit, Father Joe Yaconel, who began the legal aid services for the Adivasis in South Gujarat, and several other Jesuits here in Gujarat. We have had Jesuits there in South America who were killed in El Salvador because they took on a very powerful regime. In India, see, Jesuits were known as being the first schoolmasters of Europe and the world. We open public schooling, for ordinary people. It was the privilege of the rich, of the nobility, of those who were studying for priesthood to have education. But it was the Jesuits who opened education. So that's why for years we were called educationists. At one time, we slowly veered from education into challenging the system. So the powerful people in Europe even suppressed the Society of Jesus. A little tour of little over 200 years ago, we were restored thanks to some people like the Queen of Russia at that time and so on. But because of the human rights work, because we took on the powerful, because we took on the vested interests, Jesuits in India have been doing a lot. We have been working on a right to food campaign. We have been working in the slums. We have been working in the villages. We have been accompanying the Adivasis, the Dalits, the other backward communities, trying to, with the sisters, trying to empower lots of women, take education to the poorest of the poor. A lot of our education here, say in Gujarat and definitely in Maharashtra too, is for the tribal people, for those who have no access to quality education. So very often we are known only by the big institutions that we run. Good, because we have had some of the elite of the country even being educated in these institutions. But a lot of our work, education work too, is with the poor and marginalized sections of society, non-formal education, and also village schools and other schools. So we have the whole range of activities here in India and South Asia, which in which we attempt to empower the poor, the marginalized, the excluded. Father Pedro Arupe in 1980 began the Jesuit Refugee Service. I worked for 3 years in the Middle East, and it is the Jesuit Refugee Service just now. And we have the Pope, who's a Jesuit, Pope Francis. Look at his latest encyclical, Fratelli Tutti. He speaks about social justice. He speaks about the dignity of every human being. And so much of the words, he's using it together with the Grand Imam of Abu Dhabi, Al Tayeb. He's talking about making the world a more humane, just, equitable, and peaceful place. And a lot of this actually has stemmed out from our own Jesuit spirituality. We have contributed, but whatever we say, I don't want to be sounding arrogant. There is much more that we as Jesuits have to be doing for society today, both in India and in other parts of the world. We are still nowhere actually from what our mandate actually is. We have to do much more together with all other women and men of goodwill.
That was very powerful. Father Frazer, I mean, I just want to, a personal grief that Father Stan recently suffered during the last 6 months of the pandemic, when he lost his young nephew to the COVID pandemic. And again, I get this all from my good friend, Xavier, because Xavier Dias was a common friend, and often we spoke. And he lost his older sister soon after that. So, and he felt that that was because of the sorrow of losing her son. And despite that, I mean, he was able to look at the sorrows of society around him, despite the personal loss that he had suffered. And he was completely and most at home always in Jharkhand. For him, it was Ranchi, it was the ashram in Jharkhand where that was his home. Father Frazer, do you think the response from Christians, other marginalized groups, minorities, the church, not just to Father Stan's arrest, but to this host of injustices that we've referred to, do you feel that it has been adequate?
Yeah, I must confess that, the church has been very used to working for charitable causes, showing compassion to people who are the victims of the system. And so, for example, during the COVID problem, and you have all the migrants, etc., in distress, the church came out all over the country, and definitely in Mumbai, in a very strong way. So you can see that the church is very strong in charitable works and looking after the victims, as I would say. However, we are not very strong in involving ourselves in issues of justice. And that is probably something that we lack, and something that we have not yet been able to be initiated in for the large part. As far as the Society of Jesus is concerned, I think that too is true. However, as Father Cedric mentioned, one of our major policy directives is that everything we do should in some way, maybe indirectly, but in some way, it should be directed towards justice, towards making our world a more just way. So even a thing like education, and a very so-called elite institution like St. Xavier's College, with which I was associated for many years, we have a lot of programs there which get students to do an analysis of society, to get in touch with the disadvantaged. And that really converts them, because, where the mind is challenged by direct action and by the emotions that come from contact with troubled people, with people who are marginalized, then the mind is challenged to change. So the heart needs to be touched. And we have a lot in our schools and colleges which reach out to touching the heart of our students, so that they can then be challenged to change their thinking and involve themselves in the work for a better society. So while the church and the Jesuits are not there yet, we have a long way to go as far as involvement in justice issues is concerned. I think that's the journey we are all making. So for example, as far as the environment is concerned, it's so important, to change our lifestyle, to use less plastic, less water, grow trees, etc. But what is destroying our environment today? It is really social policy. And so when the environment norms are being changed, if Christians and others, don't join together and oppose such changes, then I think really we are doing something which is wrong. We are not really living our Christianity and our humanity fully. So I'm really happy to mention here that in the RA program, we had so many Christian groups, including Christian groups from Bandra, taking part in that campaign to save RA. And we are very grateful to the present government and, of course, Mr. Aditya Thackeray, who was our student, and we have a very cordial relationship, that they have actually turned it totally around. So you can see that participation in justice issues by the public is something that is very important and is effective. So I'm very optimistic that when we participate in Stand for Stan, and for all his companions, the 16 of them in jail, that the government will listen to participation in the democratic process from the grassroots. That's what I think we all need to link up and do together.
Actually, that's a very good example. The RA campaign is one of the good news campaigns of the recent times. We are hoping that the coastal road also follows the same way, because the coastal road is another project that is hugely damaging for Mumbai. But before we wind up today's fascinating discussion, I just wanted to put one more question, that with Father Stan's arrest, and of course there's been a huge outcry after 83-year-old Father Stan Swamy was 3.5 days ago, today is the 4th day, picked up without warrant, as has been said, by the NIA. He was questioned 5 times in the month of July. He answered in detail every single question that was put to him. He has made a public statement saying that none of the questions put to him were about Bhima Koregaon or the incident at Bhima Koregaon. All the questions had to do with his work in Jharkhand, had to do with his work in Bagaich, had to do his work with Adivasis. So it's very, very clear that the target of the NIA had nothing to do with Bhima Koregaon. We'd like to state on record here is that Shambhaji Bide and Milind Ekbote, 2 leaders who are we made rabid speeches around that time, and the first FIRs after Bhima Koregaon violence, where Dalits were fired upon, were actually filed even by the then government, Fadnavis government, and against them before the fabricated FIR was filed. But no action has been taken against either Milind Ekbote or Shambhaji Bide. So we are seeing a complete flip-flop of the narrative, trying to wipe out the earlier story. I just want to say, because the land rights and the Adivasi struggle is going to be so critical for India's future, for sustainable development and for our environment, do you think that Father Stan's arrest in particular is going to have an impact on the land struggle, the rights struggle and the Adivasi struggle in general, Father Cedric? And then we can wind up with a few last words.
I'm very confident that it will, because one of the group that is most affected by Stan's incarceration are the Adivasis. Yeah. The groups that are most affected by the incarceration of the others are Dalits, tribals, and people who have a lot to lose. Then this adhesive, this bond is taken away from them. So now we know, we have seen the protests even happening in Ranchi. The Adivasis are coming out. They are saying enough is enough. They are taking on the mining mafia, which is, very much behind it. And some of them might have passed out from the portals of our own institutions. Yeah. Powerful people sitting in the corporate sector, in air-conditioned offices, who are trying to dehumanize, deny the Adivasis of their land, of their forests, and of their water. So what we need to be doing at this stage, you know, is to try to highlight these facts. The facts that the people who are most affected are Indian citizens, the poor, the vulnerable, the marginalized, the excluded, those who are on the periphery, who are being denied their legitimate rights. They are coming out, they are being galvanized, and many of us from across the board, you know, from all walks of life, irrespective of our religious affiliation, or whether Stan is a Jesuit or Stan is a Christian or not. Well, for us, as important, as precious are the others who are incarcerated, whether it is Sudha or Varavara or Anand or whoever it is, those are Umar Khalid and the others who are there in jail. We need to be visible and vocal, saying that the Constitution is ours. Justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity are ours. The sovereignty of the people belongs to the people of India. We are secular, we are socialist, and we will do our best to ensure that this democratic fabric is preserved. We have gone through hard times, they have destroyed a lot, but today the ordinary people, I'm sure, will come out, and we need to support them in this people's movement for an India which is of tomorrow, which belongs to the people of India.
Well said, well said. Father Frazer, few last words?
I'm glad that you mentioned, you know, the real perpetrators of this violence at Bhima Koregaon, because that is so strange, isn't it?
Yes.
The then IG of Pune Rural, Mr. Vishwas Nangre Patil, he's a reputed police officer of Maharashtra. He was in Mumbai too. And he had instituted an inquiry immediately after that violence.
Yes, it's all there on record.
There were quite a few, there were 22 FIRs registered, and there were 2 arrests also. And they had said about 1,400 people were suspect in that violence. Now that case has been totally sidelined, or rather it has been. Now, you cannot have 2 sources of the violence. So we are going along, you know, a track which is totally leading us to nowhere, because these cases cannot be proved because there is no such evidence. Whereas in the place where there is evidence, there is nothing being done. So I'm really worried, and I think this is something we need to take up as civil society. Why are those cases not being investigated in a thoroughly professional manner? And why are we not being told what the results are? I think we have a government now which we have a government with integrity, and the constituents of the government need to be told that we want answers to those cases that have been filed, so that we really get to the root of the matter as far as Bhima Koregaon is concerned. So I would suggest that we all petition the government to take that up. That would be something concrete to do.
Yeah,
yes.
So hopefully there is some hope in the Maharashtra government, and listening to the fact that there was some statement by Mr. Sharad Pawar a few months ago saying that that aspect of the violence will be looked at. But I think citizens' voices need to be raised around that issue, and demands need to be made. And at least there should be, from the Maharashtra police, there should be some integrity and independence of investigation vis-a-vis the original FIRs in the Bhima Koregaon case, which were lodged but have got buried. And as far as the central government is concerned, I can only say that weak is a government and insecure is a government that really fears human rights workers, free thinkers, dissenters, activists, and journalists. I mean, with such a huge and vast majority, one would have assumed that they would have the grace to govern with some respect for the Indian Constitution. But obviously, any amount of dissent is something that is intolerable to them. We've seen recently what has happened in Hathras and the ghastly tragedy there, and the way even that there's an attempted cover-up at the end. I can only say that we can just keep having such conversations, making sure that as far as our voices can reach, we get the truth to come out. And as we dedicate today's conversation to Fr Stan Swamy, with hope and prayers and wishes for his quick release from a completely unjust incarceration. We hope that he remains well. We hope that people get to see him. We hope he has access to his lawyers and family. I mean, family from the Society of Jesus and his colleagues. We hope that others who can't also meet their families and lawyers because of the COVID pandemic, even they are allowed to meet, because unfortunately, even this COVID-19 pandemic is not allowing prisoners of conscience to meet their lawyers, to meet their friends, to meet their family. And that makes kind of incarceration even harder. All I can say is thank you very, very much, both of you, for sparing your time at such short notice. But we live in very, very difficult times indeed, and I think we need to keep having such conversations. Let's all hope and pray for the ideals of the Indian Constitution to be met, and ideals of the principle of justice, equality and fraternity to be upheld. Thank you so much, Father Cedric and Father Frazer. Thank you.